You have to define your own version of success. That you could wake up to at 6 in the morning and say, okay, I'm doing well enough. I'm not going to shut down the business now. Mine is simple. I want continuity. I want Tafeta to be existing when my kids grow up to take over, a business or do whatever they want to like. I want them to have an option to even look at the business as something they could consider.
Welcome to Third Culture Africans, the lifestyle podcast for dreamers, thinkers, and doers. We celebrate artistry, share stories from those brave enough to create something and succeed, listen to diverse perspectives on African success, and those shifting the needle on culture. I'm Zeza Oriaki Sao, your host. On this week's episode of Third Culture Africans, we have Ayo Adeyinka of Tafeta Galleries. He runs an incredibly fascinating heritage-led art business that is inspired by the vast history of arts and creative culture coming out of Lagos, Nigeria. He is an incredible student of art and is passionate about West African artists, and his focus is West African artists. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did enjoy sitting with Ayo and digging through his experience and life in the art world. So hi Ayo, thank you for coming on to Third Culture Africans.
Thank you, Zeze, for having me.
Everyone seems to ask why the name Third Culture Africans. And I think this was one of your earlier questions when we sat and had like a chat. And I was like, I'm starting this podcast.
And you have to remind me what the answer to that again is. I can't remember.
So I guess there are a bunch of Africans who are doing amazing things in different industries. So whether that's creating a brand, creative industries, supporting industries, but essentially moving the needle on culture. And this is a show essentially for us, by us, to have cool conversations, because I think the idea of success is somehow mystified in our culture around how people make it and seemingly make it, right? Because at different points, the world might think you're making it, but you're drowning. I remember meeting you in, I think it was, I want to say 2006.
I think so, yeah, because I'd already set up the company by then.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
You were moonlighting as an art consultant.
Absolutely. I was probably moonlighting on my day job as well, to be honest.
And you were moonlighting as an art consultant, and I met you through a mutual friend, and you had said you were an art consultant. And at the time, the art scene was very much Frieze, the big galleries in London. And we were essentially immigrant kids running around London and trying to carve out this space. And you actually took us to Yinka Shonibare's. You were the one who introduced an
exhibition, yeah.
Yeah, you introduced me to Yinka, actually, like him as an artist.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And you were like, come, let's go see this guy. I remember because we're on Marylebone Road. Vividly, actually.
Shocking. I'm sure I can't remember that exhibition, but well done.
Yeah, we're on Marylebone Road. And I'd never heard of Yinka before at the time. But I think this was at the beginning of his rise. And so as we're walking, you're describing, the fact that he has this disability and all of these great things. And then I think I ask you, what do you do? And you're like, well, I'm a banker. And then I thought, that's odd. But banker turned art consultant.
I think it was banker and art. Well, I wasn't a banker. I worked in a bank.
Okay.
I was in finance. I was in the finance function of a bank. So, of course, that was the core day job. But then I was already starting to collect. The mutual friend you spoke about, I think I bought one of his early works.
Okay.
I was already seeing myself as some kind of semi-sophisticated collector, even though I had maybe like 5 pieces. Because I was being asked advice by other people that I hadn't started collecting yet. Hence the fact that I started calling myself a consultant. Look, did I have any real consulting gig? Possibly not. That didn't come until later. But when you start giving people advice, you start thinking that you're being
something.
consulted. So hence the term consultant.
Yeah, I think 13 years on, the version of you then, if he came to consult for you now,
I probably would turn him away straight off. There's just no point in thinking I can give this guy money to give me advice.
Yeah.
Because earlier versions are always aspirational.
Yeah.
Our later versions are more grounded on the reality of the business.
Very true.
And knowledge.
Very true. And so you evolved from an art consultant to now the FT making headline Tafeta.
I doubt if I made any headlines in the FT. Been featured
Well,
a few times.
you've had some great articles, even articles around, telling people how to spend it, and you've had some great mentions in the press. I think through Tafeta, I must say that with what you've been able to do, and I'll let you tell everyone about what Tafeta is, but with what you've been able to do, I must say that you were probably one of the first people to start to put contemporary African art in the mainstream for a broader audience, and even the African audience, to be fair, where we start to see it in a professional light. Because I think the early artists like Yinka Shonibare with African heritage were all showing in a more first world European space till guys like you turned up and made it accessible for other Africans to start to appreciate their work.
I mean, whilst I want to take the credit, I always start by saying there were a few more people that came before me, for sure. But then I like the third culture African angle because I can take some credit for, re-engaging my own peers, the immigrant kids, the bankers, the lawyers, with contemporary African arts again.
Yeah.
Now I have a gallery, and my openings are always full of my previous kind.
Yes.
When I was in finance, it's you've got Morgan Stanley guy here, Henston Young guy there, Freshfield, female lawyer there. So those are the kind of professional class of Africans.
Yes.
That now, I would say re-engaging as well, because their parents probably engaged with the arts, and then there was a lull, and then they just discovered it again.
This podcast is sponsored by Malay Natural Science. Malay's products are inspired by the rich landscapes, alluring scents, and ancient wisdom of Africa. Their luxurious fragrance and body care range balances 100% natural active ingredients and scientifically proven formulas to heal, protect, and pamper your skin. Malay ships worldwide, and you can buy their products at maleeonline.com. They also offer a free sample if you'd like to try. I guess one of the key things about being a third culture kid and now third culture African is we are lots of things, but not really many things in anywhere. So I thought it would be fun to include in the episodes saying our names properly, because you're Ayo, Adeyinka when people introduce you.
Yeah.
But I guess in the African sense of the word,
it's Ayo Adeyinka.
There you go.
I mean, to be honest, there are people in Lagos that probably get that wrong as well. Remember, it's diverse cultures.
Yeah.
You have strong groupings of Igbo people in Lagos, Nigeria. They're not going to pronounce my name correctly.
No.
So internationally, you do get it pronounced incorrectly. But some people like me have had practice about your name being pronounced incorrectly before you even came to the UK.
And you just somehow accept it, right? At some point, you just go, oh yeah, I'm Ayo.
Depends on what kind of checks you're writing, to be honest. I choose my battles carefully.
And the name Tafeta,
yes.
What does that mean for you?
That's more exciting for me because Tafeta, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, your gallery Tafeta.
While you're at Christie's or Sotheby's,
Exactly,
and we'll get to all of those great things later.
Yeah, but then it's pronounced Tafeta. It's a derivation. It's actually a shortening of a Yoruba phrase, Ohun Tafeta, which literally means the things we want to sell.
Nice.
Right. So the gallery always had the commercial bent from the name, but I always try to choose a name that had that, duality to its pronunciations, and the fact that it means taffeta, the material, which was was always used as a medium for painting historically. So there's that. It's something to do with paintings, historicized word, but it's also a Yoruba word that means this is the commercial angle we're taking.
Nice. So pulling in elements of, I guess, heritage.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which seems to be a common thread actually through all our guests who are doing cultural things. I think the idea of taking what is beautiful and in some ways sometimes overlooked and creating out of that a business, a vision that other people can appreciate and have conversation with, I think is the unique part, because I think there are galleries out there, but what you do is a little bit more than just being an art consultant and owning a gallery and trying to sell people work. You're passionate about the artists that you work with.
Quite.
Very, actually. I remember the first time you showed me Babajide.
Yes.
His
my
work.
youngest artist, yeah.
And I was blown away. But at the same time, I was like, it's not political enough for my taste.
Absolutely, yeah.
But his craftsmanship and the artistry in what he does, like
Yes.
digging through the mud to find somebody like that. How does that process work for you?
I think one of the lucky things, and I'm sure you'll get this with some of the other people you're going to be interviewing, is subconsciously we're delving into our cultural heritage without even realizing that we're making it a point of departure. It's vast, the history we have to tap into. It's vast, the things that have happened before us. We have a long history of, artistic production, writing, oral stories.
Yeah.
It's inevitable that after some time of actually even encountering it in a minimal way, you can make something of it. Now, for me, it's easier because I have artists that are actually doing extensive research into those histories. Those, you spoke about Babajide, you have Victor Ikpuk, whose artistic production is based on the CBD
Yes.
writing systems from ancient Igbo land
Nice.
or Benin straddles.
Yes.
You've got Yinka Shorinari, who is interrogating cultural transitions
Colonialism.
between the West and
Yeah.
Africa. Babajide is looking at history of the Yorubas extensively. With that pool of resource, right, making commerce of something that you want to share anyway makes it passion. Makes it a passion. Nowadays I try to elevate what I'm doing to a calling,
Yes.
because I promise you, living in a world of finance is probably easier to make money
Yeah.
than being an art dealer.
For me, the show is about showing a different side of success where it's about purposeful work.
Yes.
Because our businesses are not just businesses.
No.
Our businesses have purpose within them.
We spoke about that, right? If our businesses were just businesses, we'd be like,
Why are we doing this?
Is not working. Yeah,
Why
it's
are we
not-
doing this for? Our peers are enjoying and
Exactly.
living large.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think the purpose behind the work, I think, is the interesting part, because I think that is the magic sauce to the success.
Yes. It's also the fulfillment whilst you're trying to build the success. It's what keeps you going, to be honest.
It really does.
Yeah, because, you sometimes just look at it from a purely, I'm trained as an accountant.
Yeah.
Look at this from a purely accounting perspective. I was speaking to a dealer friend the other day, Addis Finance, and she was saying, we're literally running a retail business without retail margins.
Yes.
And, looking at it from just that core perspective of how to run a business, this is never going to work. I also tease that as an art dealer, you're always going to be poorer than your client.
Always.
Always. So
Always.
there's nearly no aspiration in the business.
Yeah.
Right? So, but
I
you do
remember
this for a reason.
that one of the first times where we talked about, I guess, our role, right?
Yeah.
Because I guess the African context is you are the boss.
Hmm.
So when people come and we're both like, if I have to beg, if I have to pour you a cup of tea, whatever you want, because as the customer,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
you are gold.
Yes. Yeah.
And always gold.
Yeah. And in our case, in my case especially, the customer is also not just taking that position of being more important,
Yeah.
but it's also a lot more liquid.
Yes.
Because it's spending his disposable income on
Yeah.
something I'm earning a margin on.
Yes.
And this that sometimes they're quite pricey items. So
Quite.
yeah, it's important from
Quite.
that perspective.
Quite.
No,
Be modest.
the African art space
Yes.
is still a steal.
In comparison to the likes of your what happens at Christie's, and I think we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Let's dial back to, I guess we've kind of thrown into modern day because
Yeah.
we know each other and we're friends, but
Yes.
I would love to dial back into early Ayo.
Mm-hmm.
So how does it begin? Family life, I guess, because we're all, in so many ways, our passions and where we decide to go is very much rooted in our family life and where we come from. Sometimes our positioning in that, the influence of our
Or do we
parents.
just try and find those stories because they make a better narrative?
I think the journey to becoming makes a difference.
I guess.
So, you grew up in what state?
In Lagos, I'm very much a Lagos
So you're
boy.
Lagosian.
Fully, actually. So very much a Lagos boy with a mom and a dad initially, but we lost my dad early.
Wow.
So there's also that single mother narrative, I
Yes.
guess you throw that in. So that helps because you see someone working hard for you.
Yes.
And then you pick up the notion that nothing comes easy and
Mm-hmm.
you learn to work harder. I'll put that to that. My mom wanted to be an artist.
Oh, wow.
She actually spoke to my dad about it, and he said, paraphrasing, "You're going to starve."
What are you doing?
Exactly. So she ended up in banking and made a bit more money than he did eventually because he was a teacher.
Yes.
So from that perspective, good advice. from a creative perspective, nothing
You
came
saw
out of
you
that.
saw her passion for
I saw a
art
passion for
die,
the arts, and she
basically.
started collecting one of my uncles, who is a known art historian now. So
Okay.
that's my, first example of collecting as a family.
Okay.
And then we moved on. I came here. No, I did my degree in accounting, qualified, wanted to do my ACCA, which is professional qualifications, decided to come to the UK to do that.
Yeah.
And ended up in finance. I worked about 10 years in and out of, no, actually 10 years straight in the industry. When I say in and out, was 10 as a permanent staff. Some of it was as a consultant in the financial space. Started collecting myself personally in the UK.
Yeah.
And after some time, again, based on that relationship with peers,
Yeah.
we're like, okay, I could actually talk to people about this.
Yeah.
And I could actually make some margin on this. Like, I remember buying early modernist work from Germany and
Yeah.
selling to my friends in Lagos
Oh, wow.
because there was a massive price arbitrage.
Yes.
The guys in Germany did not really care for what they were selling. They bought it historically in the 60s and 70s. It didn't mean very much to them. The guys in Lagos always need those artists because we were taught about those artists in
Yes.
school. And, so you could buy others, you could make some good margin back then.
Nice.
The auction houses came and spoiled that for everybody.
But what's so interesting is about the evolution, like, I guess the starting out, you kind of touched on that around, it was your passion for art and collecting that began, I guess, what became Taffeta.
Yes.
But somewhere in between that, I think most people always ask, and you probably get this in every interview or every, when they send you those questions for editorials, and it's like, how did you start? That question is, and they always make it sound like they don't care about the financial parts of how you started.
Yeah.
But the real question is, financially, how did you begin your journey? Yes, you had a great job in the city, but you also had responsibilities.
Yes, and I'm sure I didn't have a stack of savings anywhere that, that drove the starting. I think there was not very much thinking. There wasn't a kind of like eureka moment that said, okay, this is it, I'm setting up a company. I'd already set up a limited company.
As we all did.
Exactly. That's your truth as a Nigerian.
Vision.
Just set something up in case you need to.
Vision. Exactly. We have the vision.
Exactly. So, and then I started advising as well. I think one of the key elements to the success story was Bonhams wanted to start an auction on African arts.
Yeah,
and
that's Africa Now, right?
Yes. And I was already knowledgeable enough that time to actually act as a consultant to them.
So this is circa 2000 and what?
This is 2008. I think
So-
the actual sale was 2009.
So Taffeta 2005.
Yes.
Taffeta
Yeah.
in quotations
Registered
as
business, yeah.
moonlighting. So 3 years later, but at this point you're still working the bank.
Yes, I am. I'm still working in finance for sure.
But you're grinding on the weekend at every
Yeah,
opening.
trying to make as many shows. Back then I saw more exhibitions.
Okay.
I traveled more for arts because I didn't have to,
You went outlaying.
exactly. As income from something else, I could actually do a bit more. But then it was also building your base of knowledge.
Yeah.
Right. I'm building a contact base that helped later as well. Because people started to see you. I mean, in all modesty, I was one of the few people of my background in many of the spaces I went to. Being a person of color or being Nigerian, you're just not seeing many people around art parties back
No.
then. So you built a visibility. You talked to the right people. You knew a bit about what you were talking about. Then you could advise people like Bonhams. And at that point, then I needed a vehicle to take fees I was being paid.
Yes.
Even though it was just commissions on sales
Yeah.
for consignments. And after that, you get more confident.
Yeah.
You've traveled to Lagos once or twice as a consultant for a known auction house in the UK.
Did you have that vision, arts consultants, where
Well,
you're
it was
getting on
good
the
to actually
plate?
show up and to
And handing out the business cards in the early days is exciting.
very exciting. And I remember then as well, I had introductory letters from Bonhams.
Nice.
Introduced me as the consultant for the African
at
House
that.
to come. Yeah, I mean that
Clout.
definitely- It does help in Lagos, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That place is very titularly
Yeah.
inclined, so
Clout.
the more you're seen to be a part of a big organization. And I could also drop the fact that day job is Morgan Stanley. This is just what I do on the side. So all that
giving
actually
them.
helped the branding
Nice.
early days. Look, this is all the
In 2019, they'll say packaging.
thank you. And I was going to say this is all the very for real realities.
No, but there's something about how I would say almost everyone on the show, the evolution into into who we are now and how seemingly that success arrives.
Yes.
So you describing Africa now and your relationship with a huge house like Bonhams.
Yeah.
But your reality of that versus someone who picked up that FT article is completely different to what you've just described. Because to you, you were still hustling.
Yeah,
and
of course.
thankfully, Bonhams thought you were just a cool black guy who was happy to give you that letter. Mm-hmm. And there's something about time and place that plays a huge role. And there's small building blocks. It's never this huge, hey, I had this vision.
Yes.
And I've gone from banking to this huge success.
And some of those building blocks, you don't even realize the enormity of it until, after the effect, until you're using it as your LinkedIn credit line. You're right. Many things, it's not just by chance, though.
No.
It happens by being there. And there's a lot of provenance. You have to speak to the right people and you have to be taken seriously by the right people. And you could easily be dismissed.
Yeah. And you just described being a student of art.
Exactly.
You would travel to the shows.
Yes.
You would do what it took.
And then I used to consume volumes of book on African art. I have no art historical background. So I had to learn very quickly. But I had to learn with an element of specificity that actually helps as well. Yeah. I'm not trying to learn about Renaissance period art or, Dadaism in Europe. I'm trying to learn about African art. Now, it's a big space. And of course, the whole of Africa is a large continent. So you pick on the one you're most interested in. Nigeria's art as well is huge. There's a lot of Nigerian artists. There's a lot of history in there. Read lots of books, pick lots of periods, pick movements. And the knowledge came just by wanting to know.
Lowest point?
In the whole thing?
Yeah.
Every time I look at my accounts. It's just, why am I still not breaking bread like this? The finance just brings that element of reality that just makes it a bit of a day job.
But I think there's a mixture between, I guess, your perception of success, like in terms of breaking bread.
Yes.
And there is turning something like Tafeta into something that you make a living out of.
Look, I hate to exaggerate. Of course, I've made a living out of it. But I come from doing regulatory reporting for some of the biggest banks in the world.
Yeah.
Right? You see the numbers. You see what quarterly profit looks like. You see HSBC making 14 billion a quarter.
Yeah.
And then you see your own numbers and think, well, these people don't have two heads. So that's exaggerated view of wealth.
Yeah.
Just in sheer numbers.
But I think
I used to judge some of the business.
But I think this is the thing that affects our culture, right?
It
Where
does, yeah.
As SMEs, we need to be in our space, actually. We need to be a lot more honest.
I'm more modest in our aspirations as well.
And
Yes.
what those numbers look like.
Yes.
So you're not going to go off and become the next gallery, represent the next cool artist, and be pulling an HSBC number.
No, yes, you're right. About that, yeah.
Like you're going to have to put in the work, the time, but notwithstanding. And I think even though you try and articulate this, to younger people or when people come and ask you questions, right? Because we all try and articulate it and go, maybe that's not how it looks. The reality of it, though, is it's almost like I liken it to a tap. The drip feed. It starts literally drop by drop.
Yeah.
And without the special ingredient, and everyone says passion, some people say commitment, some people say momentum. Everyone has a different version of that.
I think that's the most critical element of what you've said. You have to define your own version of success. That you could wake up to at 6 a.m. and say, okay, I'm doing well enough. I'm not going to shut down the business now. Mine is simple. I want continuity. I want Tafeta to be existing when my kids grow up to take over, a business or do whatever they want to like. I want them to have an option to even look at the business as something they could consider. Based on what I'm saying now is unlikely because they're calling me a shopkeeper dismissively.
So daddy is a shopkeeper.
Daddy is a shopkeeper. So, but you want that shop to be around when they're of age. So for me, it's about just staying in business.
Yeah.
Being a going concern.
Yes.
Not, run into trouble, dealing with the cash flow issues as you have to deal with, try and grow year on year, supporting my artist. They come to me with their own stories of need as well.
And this is the thing about our businesses because you are a home.
Yes.
to not just your employees,
Yes.
but also to your artists and your customers.
In fact, I used to look at myself as, I employed a minimal amount of people until I realized I actually have like 4 artists sign up to me exclusively. So all the income they make
Comes
is
from
actually
you.
from Tafeta's grind. And I never looked at them as employees because they're not. But still, they are a responsibility that the business has to take on board.
And the work you do
Yes.
touches more families and lives than you even realize.
Especially when you bring the whole Africa angle into the situation. We all know about the reparations of money back to the continent. It's bigger than the actual invested amount onto the continent. So the amount of money diaspora Africans send back home is actually bigger than the collective investment into the continent. So we are nearly, as this third culture individuals, also looking after we're taking on a greater responsibility.
I think so. I think
That we realize.
we're at a precipice in terms of changing, I guess, colonialism, post-colonialism Africa into this new version of having the world almost close enough that you can touch it. Now, I want to take you... Okay,
Sorry,
go.
I was going to say take something
Yeah.
I said and just... Although I do believe that we're that important in terms of how much money we're channeling back home, right? But it's also give and take. Now, the reality is that Africa is going to rise because Africans in Africa take responsibility and do absolutely the right things. And, God willing, they're in the right direction. But someone like me as well, personally, I've always sold to Africans in Africa. The vast majority of my collectors actually live on the continent. So whilst I see, the ease of doing business in the UK and seeing that there's a structure that allows me to set up a gallery in London, central London, and operate from there, the wealth that actually sustains that gallery, a lot of it comes from the continent.
And this is another thing. Like
Yeah.
my business,
Yeah.
Malay is very much on the continent,
Yes.
is my bread and butter.
Absolutely, yeah.
I do see our place in the first world or global world as, those women who in the mornings, first thing in the morning, you see them with the broom sweeping.
Yeah, on the
I
streets.
feel like that is our place in terms of shining light in our different industries.
Yeah.
And we are almost the people who are going to sweep all the debris out the way.
yeah.
So, and coming out going, okay, now the day can start.
Yeah.
Because we are stumbling. We are learning on the job, essentially. What's most important actually about that journey, I find, is that because of that, there are things like Artex and 154 and all of these things that came after. The webbing of these journeys and how they've influenced, because without the Tafetas and I wouldn't put in the Goodmans and those, because the South African landscape is completely different.
It is a different ecosystem,
But without that, the diversity that exists in the industry now wouldn't be there. So 154 being the biggest African art fair, contemporary art fair out there at the moment, and Toria being one of our guests on the show. But I think before that, there was something else.
And we need more of that. I always say I'm always confident in the fact that I need competition.
Yeah.
We need, because before we start talking about market share, there has to be a marketplace.
But we don't have it yet.
Exactly. So,
I always find those conversations premature.
Yeah, you need a critical mass to create a market share before you start carving up that market.
Yeah.
Right now, how many African-owned dealership are there out there? Not enough. So I mentor people. People ask me, should I open a gallery? I'm like, absolutely do that.
Sharpen
so that we
my
can
tools for
create
me,
this critical
please.
mass that attracts the people that we're trying to sell to.
Yeah.
And then we can start talking about, then we can get competitive.
Yeah.
Right now, it's still early days. I'm very much in support of what Turia is doing.
Yes.
And I've done enough of those fairs
Yeah.
because of that. Artex, I'm passionate about doing Artex every
Yes.
year, because I think we need that art fair in Lagos. Of course, we need more structures in Lagos. We need museum spaces built up. We need more art infrastructure set up. But by doing our part, those things are going to come as well. Very excited about a few museums opening up in Lagos in the next 1 year. Very excited.
I think the collaborative element of what we all do now, I've launched a product in your gallery space.
Yes, you are.
And I
And you
think
kindly left the air freshener. which we still
Air
use.
freshener.
Sorry, is that not what it's called? I mean,
Room mist. Room mist, please. Give us small class.
Sorry, Auntie, I just
Room mist,
call it
air
perfume.
freshener. I think we've the collaborative nature of how we work
Yes.
or are working is such a great thing. I think before we kind of, digress into air fresheners, listing out some of your biggest achievements, Bonhams, Christie's. I think you've worked
We haven't
with
worked with Christie's, actually.
Sotheby's you've
We-
done,
Yeah,
sorry.
we sold at Sotheby's regularly. The fairs we've done, the Amri show in New York. We've done a few successful fairs. We've broken some what I like to think are some critically important artists to the canon now in terms of people we represent. We've taken Yinka to Lagos.
Nice.
Managed to actually sell him to Nigerian collectors as well.
Lovely.
I mean, even as a global superstar. So we have different kind of like key points that we've achieved. Next year, I think people hear this first, but we're showing at Showcase
Lovely.
in Tefaf, the fair in Maastricht.
And
which is
what's the date?
March.
Nice.
And that's a big deal. It's a game changer for the
Huge.
gallery.
You've done Saudi, you've done Middle East.
We've shown Saudi artists at the gallery in collaboration with a friendly Saudi gallerist, Enas. I think we'll show Nigerian artists in Saudi for
Nice.
sure. We've done Dubai. We like that region.
Yeah.
They're quite receptive. They've always understood the continent. We went as far as Hong Kong for a fair last year.
Mm-hmm.
So we're always trying to break new regional ground.
Would you say you can attest to your mobility being a part of your success?
Yes, and that's down to how nimble we are. We're a small team. So if I want to do a fair in Hong Kong, I could decide very quickly with my directors and say, okay, we are doing that. We'll put the money aside and we can gamble or be it's a bit of a gamble because you're paying for the fair in advance of showing the works at all. And some of the artists you're taking to China are not known in that part of the world.
Speaking of investors,
Yes.
because everyone likes to know that part, a business like yours,
It's all self-funded from the beginning. I took like minimal investment, like 10% from two friends in the early days, and they're quite happy with it. One of them is our mutual friends, actually, surprisingly.
Yes.
But it's the most, what do I say, laid back investor there is. I don't think he remembers where his money has gone.
and I think that's sometimes we're in the era of raise VC money. And I don't know any one of us who are seemingly successful in our industries, third culture African entrepreneurs or creatives or artists who has that kind of money behind them.
The younger guys seem to be better at it than we are. And it also depends on the space. So I was looking at the, fintech space, for example.
Yeah.
And how much money that is getting poured by VCs into fintech in Lagos and Kenya. And you look at the directors or the founders of those companies, they're all sub 40.
Yes.
I mean, some of them are sub 30. I think the world has changed in that respect. I mean, if I was given a choice to go and get VC money started at gallery, I don't think VCs are going to pay very much attention to me.
And I think this is the thing. I think back to your mum saying, I want to be an artist, and your dad going, how are you going to eat type of thing.
There was a level of pragmatism to what he said that, that I took on board now.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it might look like it was limiting our ambition.
Yes.
And we don't know how it played out. It might have been, because I don't know as an artist. But there's that when I came out of finance as well, there was no consideration of going to go and take investor money to the tune of $1 million or $2 million set up a gallery.
Yeah.
I know a lot of African wealth, but none of them will have written that check back then. Absolutely none.
And it's interesting to see them
As collectors now. Yes. So that's their own element of support. They can be a throwaway spend on something they like that I advise them, or is a status buy, or is just a beautiful gift. But it's not, they didn't see it as an investment vehicle back then.
But is art about investment?
For me, it's not. It's possible you could make a lot of money buying art and selling it down the line, most likely cross-generational. The numbers are there for everybody to see. I think the Da Vinci that sold for $450 million was bought for, I don't know, initially for 5 or something.
A few generations later,
Exactly.
though.
I have a particular Benny Wong, an African artist,
Yes.
who was sold for £780 at Christie's in 2004. That is now, that same piece is listed at $300,000 today
Nice.
right? So yes, those numbers attest to vast returns.
15 years later.
Exactly. Well, those are massive. That's £780, what my friend called cash machine money. $300,000.
Yeah,
It's a big
that's
leap.
real estate returns.
Exactly. I think even more.
Yeah.
In that time span. And then, of course, you cannot sell a house for $450 million.
No.
I don't think
I
it's
think
never happened.
lose a zero. It's possible somewhere in
Exactly,
America.
yeah.
You can end up with like 50 acres of land
Yeah,
and horses
exactly.
and
But
a
this is a
ranch.
small
Neverland,
piece
maybe.
of Da Vinci. It's
Yeah.
you can take that Da Vinci as hand luggage. So it's that vast return, real life return that makes people think, yes, surely an investment vehicle. But the reality is that most of the art people buy, they're never going to sell. Most of the art people buy, they never want to sell. Right? The people collect for different reasons.
Yeah.
And if you're collecting from just the sheer numbers alone, if you set up an art fund just to buy and sell, you have to be very specific about what you're doing.
Yeah.
And in that situation, you probably have to put a lot of money on the table to make a lot of money.
Yeah. Because then it's like everything else, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Because essentially you're trading.
Yeah, then you buy Picasso and you're sure it's a safe bet.
Because it's going to do what it's going to do.
It's going to do what it's going to do.
The industry, in your perspective, as someone who's at the forefront of, because I think you have people who appreciate the art, people who want to get involved in the scene.
Yes.
And then you have people who either are looking at it through investment, and then you have your clients
Yes.
who enjoy the art,
Yes.
so they consume it. And potentially we have all four of these people, right, exist in our culture and in our societies.
Yes.
For each of them, where do you find the industry now?
For starters, they can all be catered to. There's a breadth of artistic production in Africa that caters to each of those artists, collector group, rather. If you want a young, dynamic artist, there are people I can recommend. If you want a surefire investment vehicle, you're probably looking at some of the modernists like Benny Nwonwu or the South African or El Salai Ibrahim, or El Anatsui. You're going to pay money. It's very likely you're going to sell that for much more down the line. If it's more of you want to collect by numbers, again, there's a lot of art to buy. If you want to own a private museum down the line, there's a way we could guide you to do that. So it's a big continent. And because of the sheer numbers of art being made on that continent, right, it allows us to actually cater to a vast number of collector group. Each person has to take advice, though. And we have to know that they know what they want before we can tell them what we think they should do.
I think what I enjoy the most about this time is the fact that for the first time, probably since colonialism, we now have art that's documenting our time.
The contemporary issues, yeah. It happened post-colonial Africa as well, though. Very excitedly, for a short period before the
time.
Yeah, especially in Nigeria when the military intervention came about and art just became practically a non-entity. But yeah, that's just pre-independence with the Mbari group in Nigeria to post-independence with Benny Nwonwu and the Zaria rebels. And, that was very exciting times for me. The time I was look back to.
And I think a lot of artists look back to that time.
Yes, because it was also documented.
Yeah.
One. And two, there were theoretical aspirations. They formed groups and said, this is what we want to do as a collective. And this is what we want to achieve. We want to integrate, cultural nuance from an African perspective into new ways of making art from a Western perspective. Groups like that existed. They said what they wanted to do, and it was cross-continental, and it was quite Pan-African.
Very much so.
Remember people like things like Festac.
Very much so.
And I say examples of Jacob Lawrence, the African-American artist, going to Nigeria in 1964 and living there for 2 years. And there was this particular event that happened that he was there. Nina Simone was the performing artist, and Benny Nwonwu was a special guest of honor.
Yeah, I've just recently been delving into, I guess, more historical time in our culture.
Yes.
And what's so interesting is there was that period, and then there was this huge devaluing of everything.
Yeah.
It was almost instant.
Yes.
And how you go from the rise of a voice, because these were voices coming to the fore at the time. And I don't know if you come across these books, African Ceremonies, African Twilight,
Okay. Twilight,
amazing
maybe.
coffee table books.
Yes.
documenting our history and traditional rights that are now almost becoming obsolete because we are now evolving into this modern world.
It is, but again, back to your first point, these are exciting times. Because those things have been looked at again. But the beauty of now is that they're being looked at from a global perspective. So there is a black world suddenly where you have people, of African descent in Norway, in Denmark, trying to reconnect with their, presidents in Ethiopia. You have the music industry in America and how intertwined they're becoming with Afrobeats in Nigeria.
Yeah.
So all those things are happening now. You have artists in South Africa whose biggest collector base is in Chicago.
Yes. Funnily enough, we got one of his pieces. We have one of his early commission piece actually.
Fantastic.
Which is incredible.
Well. Yeah.
Incredible. It was a gift.
Yeah. So it's all
friend.
that is happening now. But it didn't start now. It happened before, like you said.
Yeah, and it just something stopped.
Well, politics happened on the continent,
and then we became commercial, and it wasn't about.
Yeah.
It wasn't about, okay, let's say, for instance, the age of Fela,
yes.
right? It was about having a voice
yes.
and having some sort of controversy to
Absolutely.
fight against.
Yeah.
I think with art now, we've had challenges economically and socially.
Yes.
But it doesn't in the same place as it did then.
Fela is always a terrible example, isn't it? Because there's no repeating Fela.
Yeah, but I think looking at creativity, right,
yes.
in our space.
Yeah.
I remember going to the Wizkid concerts.
Yes.
And Davido's concerts. Because again, in the same way that your clients will support and buy a piece of art.
Yes.
I'm passionate about supporting. I come to your things. We've bought works from you. And I sat there thinking, there's a 13 or 14-year-old in this audience, and they can see that this is possible.
Yes, yeah. There's a mainstreaming happening.
When we started, it wasn't possible. We were the one. And even now I go to, and I'm sure the same with you, when you're in world stage events.
Yes, I think at the best then, if I looked at art dealing as a profession, my aspiration would have been limited to one or two dealers I knew in Lagos.
Yeah.
There was no Larry Gagosian of African descent I could look at. Absolutely not.
No White Cube.
No, White what? There was not even a gallery in London. There's absolutely no chance. So you had to, and I didn't want to look at Stevenson and Goodman, the South African gallery. What they've done is very impressive, but like you said, the South African space was a very different space.
Different landscape.
Completely different landscape. And I didn't even think that was actually viable as well. For me, trying to sell West African art in London. So I could look at non-African dealers. I particularly liked Aquavella in New York, and I also look at their programming and think, look how beautifully the guys have mixed modernism and contemporary art. But I couldn't look at a specific example of my own kind. Now there are good galleries owned by Black people globally, and also it was also a lack of knowledge, I have to say, because there are African American dealers that operated in the 20s and 40s and 50s, but I was not familiar with them. I'm only beginning to know now. Some of them I actually follow now on Instagram.
Nice.
People that have been dealing for years and years. And then you start to think, okay, now I know what I know now, if I knew then, I would have had maybe different types of mentorship sets. Mm-hmm. If you're in a different profession, it's different. If you're a doctor, a neurosurgeon, a banker, there was always one person to look at then. We're operating in spaces that are slightly more new.
Hopefully through Third Culture Africans, the podcast, there will be some documentation that someone can listen to this episode and take from it some of these inspirations.
And it's not to say in the traditional fields, when I say traditional fields of success for Africans, the lawyers, the bankers, the engineers, it's not to say Black children don't need mentorship. They still need people to look up to aspire to. So Third Culture Africans is important to that more... What's the space we're in? Just more...
Conversational.
No, well, and I mean just that non-traditional route to making a success of yourself. But, someone's podcasts are necessary from this perspective. Just say, okay, if you're a banker, you should look at people like Vernon Jordan or Bayo Ogunlesi in New York. If you're a lawyer, these are the people you can aspire to. Yeah. It's important to actually see people that look like you doing well. Wizkid and Davido is a phenomenal example for the young as well. They put in the grind. and they're successful because they work hard.
Yeah.
You know, and they could have started. I remember telling someone that of the culture space, the visual arts is a poor cousin.
Yeah.
Music, film, theater, even.
Seemingly so.
Yes, because just the reach of those guys. Nollywood is consumed everywhere. You know, Afrobeats is just mainstreamed.
But I think the evolution of those industries is making room for more industries.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
And I think historically that's always been the case.
Yes, yeah,
those are the guys through their art.
Yes.
Those are the guys that break ground.
Yeah, I think literature started it off for us with people like Chinua Achebe and Wole Soyinka.
Yeah.
And then Fela came and did music. And without Fela, there's no Davido for sure.
Yeah.
They might not have the same messaging in their music, but
No,
it showed.
Burna Boy even.
Absolutely.
You know? Did you see his Wembley show? I thought that was insane.
I didn't, but I know he's been nominated for the Grammy.
Yeah.
Which is impressive.
Insane.
Yeah, yes, it is.
I think we need to, I guess the question being is, do you see visual, because you see European artists do this where they cross over and there are collaborations between visual arts and an artist, for instance. Do you see that happening in the African space?
Are you asking me that if I want to like do some small collabo with Wizkid?
You know, that could be it.
If only to just fly private jets off another place would be a good look.
No, but it has
is
been done
possible.
in other spaces,
It
right?
is. You see fashion and arts doing a lot on this side of the world.
Yeah.
And again, that's another space that is doing very well
Yeah.
locally. Yes, they're always, you have to plan the collaborations as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have to have an equal element of ideas when you're coming in. It doesn't always work, and sometimes it works very well.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, there are things we look at, there are people we talk to all the time there. Across that spectrum of, you know, visual, film, art, a simple example would be that the more of the movies being made on the continent, the higher the production quality is, the more we're inclined to say, okay, can we lend some art pieces
Yeah.
to the sets?
But we're also seeing now, though, in, I guess the people who are ahead of us, right? You're seeing this in shows. You're seeing at shows. You're
that's
seeing
happening.
this
Yeah,
incorporated.
Absolutely. It's happening very much in the TV productions in the States, for example.
Yeah.
You know, where you look at the movies and you know that each artist has got a placement. You know,
Yes.
product placement from the visual arts perspective it become more common in mainstream television
Yeah.
in America. So yeah, it can happen. It will happen. But I'm not going to call up the phone and just say, hey, the video is time.
Hey, have you heard of Tafeta? Give us a ring.
I think they have, actually, surprisingly.
They probably
yeah,
have.
Yeah, I know them. I know
But
his manager.
I see it coming.
Yeah.
I see it
will
coming.
come.
And when
will
it
come.
happens, you have to call me. You owe me a drink.
Absolutely, yeah. What, you want
You
to do
owe me a
music
drink.
video?
I'll give you some agege bread and tea.
Well, that's a deal then. That's an absolute deal.
I like to end each show on a high.
Yes, please.
And your biggest or your I made it moment.
I did go to Davos in 2015.
Nice.
Yeah. I didn't even know.
As Tafeta?
Yeah, as myself, actually. Was the panel called The Future of the Art World. I think it's important because I did not know how important the World Economic Forum was until I got back. Nobody
You were
invited
just
me
happy
to
for
come
an
at Morgan
invite
Stanley.
to Davos.
So when I came out,
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I think
So yeah, no, but I think really that's just Outworld. He acts very well for the news, but my biggest success is the artists are mainstreamed.
yeah.
The young artists I've worked with that nobody knew. I didn't know. They didn't know how far they were gonna go, and now we're talking about placing them in museums, showing them everywhere.
Your Babaji
It's-
days.
yeah,
your...
the knees, the
yeah.
Kechi, Ebedike, who we just started working with recently and just placed at a American museum this year alone. So we're quite proud of that. Those are our moments, and they come regularly.
Fabulous. And if you had to leave a nugget for a lawyer who's an aspiring artist or a consultant in, one of the firms who wants to do something with their money, what would you say?
Truly, save up more before you cross over. You're going to need the cash base. It's never easy running a business.
Don't thug it out like we did.
Don't. What's the point?
Don't thug it out.
No, save up more. Put some more liquidity aside. You're going to have to deal with cash flow situations in any business. The more of a buffer you have, the better. So even though if you hate your day job, what does it matter? Keep grinding, keep doing what you do properly, and save the cash that you're going to need later.
And how do they find you if they need some art advice, need to know what
come
to
to
do?
the gallery, where our website is there, taffeta.com with a single F. So please, just show up.
And social media? Are you a social media guy?
art_Taffeta for Instagram, but that's it.
Fabulous. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for
coming
so much,
on to
Third Culture Africans. I've forgotten my show. Goodness.
Yeah, sorry, Room Mist, right? Yeah, Room Mist.
Room Mist, not Air Freshener. Thank you very much, Ayo.
Thanks again. Bye.
You can catch Taffeta at the Armory Show in New York in March 2020, as well as TFAF in Netherlands and Art Dubai, all in March 2020. Thank you for listening to this episode of Third Culture Africans, the Lifestyle Podcast. We would love to hear from you. So please find us on Facebook or Instagram at Third Culture Africans and leave us a comment. A review goes a long way in getting our show noticed, so please leave us one if you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you next time.